Hi and welcome to another Type with me. Undefined, deal with it within TypeScript. But also within JavaScript, we need to deal with undefined, right? And undefined can be an initialized or absent property of an object, a potentially omitted optional argument to a function, a return value to indicate something that was requested is missing, and a potentially initialized variable, right? But how are we going to deal with it? What are the possibilities, and how are we going to maneuver with it within TypeScript, right? I'm going to show you a lot of code today to see how we can use undefined to our advantages. So first of all, we're going to add some code right here. So we have a type foo, right? And then if you have here const equals, and we say that it's of type foo, for example, and we do something like this, bar undefined, then that's okay. But if we are doing something like this, yeah, it's not happy, right? So we can put here 11, for example. Again, if we do this, right, and we put here for 2, and we set something like this, well, then he's not happy, right? Because we are expecting to have bar there. And again, undefined can be also of type a number, so it can be that we put something that's not correctly foreseen there. Another thing that we could do, right, is saying that this is an optional parameter, and then we can do const foo 3, and then we can just do this, right? You will see that if we do this, const foo 4 is of type foo, and then we say undefined, that's also fine, right? But how are we going to deal with undefined, right? Because now we say, okay, this needs to be a number, but it can also be undefined. And if you're not, look into it and also count that in, then yeah, you can have errors, right? So we are going to deal with it like we are dealing with it within JavaScript by just having an if statement here and say, okay, if type of foo.bar is different than undefined, then we do a +1, otherwise we are throwing an error, right? Of course, you could also do something like this, right? But then again, if we are doing add 1 of 0, 0 is also falsy, right? Again, I need to do something like this, right? Bar 0, then you will see that we get an error. So if I now do deno run index.ts, you see here that we get an error. Type undefined is not assignable to type foo. And again, it's very strange that we get no error, but I think that's maybe because we have, if I can check version, yeah, that's TypeScript version 4.3.5. I'm gonna check if we can adapt this one. I'm just gonna check. It's a little bit strange that we don't get an error right here within index.ts, but okay. I'm just gonna put this into, I guess it's good that we get something like that, right? But of course, if I execute add 1 bar 0, 0 is also falsy, so if false, then we go straight to it and we say, okay, bar is undefined. if I put here 2, for example, right, and we run through it, yeah, we get a result, and it will be 3, of course, right? So that's something that you need to take into account, of course. What you could do is also put something like this there and something like this. But maybe also this could be an option. Not undefined, for example. If I now put a 0 right there and I execute this one, you see that it works. If I do now console.log, we get a 1. Again, for me, undefined is very difficult because in other programming languages you don't have it. You have just NULL when something is NULL, or it has a value, right? But undefined, not being described, not being there, right? It's something very strange. We also need to deal with this when something is optional, right? For example, this one, it's optional. A better way to deal with this is just give it a default value, right? For example, 0, and then of course put this one away. Then you don't need to do this if statement, right? But okay, if we need to do it like that, we can just deal with it, just saying if type b equals undefined, and then we return a, right? Also certain functions within TypeScripts themselves, like for example defined, it can be a string or undefined, right? So this will be an error because of course when we do something like this, console.log hello starting with, then I'm gonna put a G, for example. Nothing is starting with a G, so we should have an error, right? I'm gonna run this, and here we go. We get type undefined is not assignable to type string, right? So what we need to do is we need to deal with it, right? And we need to put there that it can also be undefined. So, like we say here, we need to put parameter undefined there. And of course, we need to type guard it. So if who is undefined, can return nothing, or something like that. Of course, I need to change this to who. So when something is optional, we need to deal with it, right? So it's important to know that, hey, I have an object and I want to put things here optional, right? Then you of course need to deal with it within your code. So it's important to think about it, right? Because you loosen up a little bit of your object, of course, but then again, if you don't type guard it, and if you don't check for it in your methods, well, then your code can crash, right? So again, something to think about, right? It's a very simple concept, but on the other hand, if you don't do that, well, yeah, TypeScript can hold your hands there, right? So you need to be aware of that in your whole code. So one last thing that I'm gonna mention right here is optional chaining, right? So foo bar, something like that. So we have here something like this, foo bar, and then we have buzz within bar, and then in buzz we have QUX, right, which is number, and then we can deal with it on a certain way, right? Again, we can use then optional chaining to say, okay, what I need to do is something like this. Foobar const foobar equals, or of course we need to put or give it a value, right? And then we can do something like this. Well, foobar, well, it has no bar, so it will just print out undefined. So if I now run it, right, we'll see that we get undefined. Even if I put right here bar undefined, for example, well, we need to have the latest value. Qx. I don't know how to spell it out, but okay. Again, you know what I mean, right? We can go a little bit further and we can then define buzz. Also say something like undefined. Again, you will put undefined there, right? And then if we put here something like this, even if that's undefined, we get undefined, right? Only when it's 0, for example, we will get 0, right? Or another number. So optional chaining, it's also something that's very great. We can deal with it with the question marks right here. And then of course we can go into our application a little bit easier by just adding if and then these question marks, and if you have then undefined, it will go no further. But you need to be aware that if your thing that your property is a number, well, 0 is falsy and then it doesn't go to your if statement, right? So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope this was useful for you. Again, when you are dealing with undefined, it's very important to deal with it correctly. Okay? So optional, well, it's not really optional. You can have undefined and you need to have some kind of assertions or asserting things in your function, and you need to deal with it, right? Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you have something or you can take something from this video with you and you can use it in your day-to-day job. Thank you very much and see you next time.